right, good evening again, everyone. My name is Darby Dickerson, and I'm Dean here at UIC John Marshall Law School. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Road to the Robe panel discussions tonight. Tonight, we're actually going to have two panels. The first is titled Building a Judicial Resume, and the second panel is titled Becoming a Cook County Judge. We hope you can stay for both discussions because we're going to be featuring different judges and experts for each panel. Our first panel this evening will discuss the knowledge and skills essential to becoming a judge and what activities help to build a judicial resume. We'll then take a short break, and at 6 o'clock, we'll welcome our second panel to discuss the mechanics of running for judge in Cook County. We are truly honored this evening to have our own Judge Judith Rice, class of 1988, serving as our moderator. Judge Rice was the first female commissioner of two of Chicago's largest governmental agencies and served as senior vice president of BMO Harris Bank before she was elected judge in the Cook County Circuit Court's 7th Subcircuit. She also serves on the UIC John Marshall Alumni Council, and she successfully won retention in the 2020 election. Congratulations, Judge Rice, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you. I can't live down the Judge Judy moniker, can I? Thank you, Dean Dickerson. I'm really excited to moderate this panel tonight. And I want to thank you, Dean, for putting together this panel. This is really very great because I wish that I'd been able to view a panel like this years ago when I thought about running for judge. Because it's a very complex process, a very long process, an arduous process. And so for those of you who are interested in running for judge, I think you're going to get a lot out of the panel tonight. I am really excited about this panel. All of the panelists here tonight, I have known both personally and professionally for many years. Many of the panelists I've worked with and or have attended John Marshall with as well. One of the most wonderful things about being a John Marshall graduate, and you should all know if you are a John Marshall graduate, is the support that you receive from John Marshall over the years. I certainly have received that support in my legal career as well as in my road to the bench. Attending seminars, being able to teach seminars, and those are all things that you can add to your resume. So I hope that you will remain involved with UIC John Marshall and even get more involved with the school. So with that as a backdrop, I realized that I became a judge 6 years ago, and I started that process probably about 5 or 6 years before I actually became a judge. And so I want to hear from the panelists. I'd love for the panelists, each of you, to spend about 3 to 5 minutes talking about why you wanted to become a judge, some of the things that you thought about in building your judicial resume. As the dean said, some of the activities that you took, perhaps some of the bar associations that you became involved with, and really some of the steps that you went through to get on your road to the bench. So I'm going to introduce each of the panelists individually. And then in order that I introduce you, I'd like for you to spend a few minutes talking about those things or anything else that you might feel is relevant for the participants to know. So our first panelist is Judge Patrice Ball-Reed. Judge Ball-Reed is a graduate of the UIC John Marshall Law School and a former president of the Alumni Association. Judge Ball-Reed worked in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office from 1989 to 2003. She completed her career there as a deputy supervisor of assistant state's attorneys. Judge Ball-Reed was a deputy attorney general in the Illinois Attorney General's Office from 2003 to 2008. Judge Ball-Reed was then elected to associate judge by the judges of the Circuit Court of Cook County in 2008. Her current term is set to expire in 2023. Judge Ball-Reed, you and I were classmates and assistant state's attorneys together back in the day. So I'd love to hear from you about your road to the bench.
Okay. Well, I thank you, Judy. Thank you all for being here. Glad we've got such great participation. I'm going to be reading from notes, so if I look down, that's what I'm doing. But my background is that I grew up on the west side of Chicago in Lawndale when I was living there. It's now called North Lawndale. And I was the first in my family to go to college, as well as the first in my family to go to law school. I attended John Marshall, and when I attended John Marshall, my mentor and friend, retired Judge Jane Stewart, was there. And going to law school was her fourth career because she had had 3 before going to law school. And what she encouraged me to do was to participate and give back. And while I was at John Marshall, I did become a law clerk at a small firm. And after I passed the bar, I became an attorney at that firm. They also encouraged me to participate, but they also added the element of networking because they were talking about you had to generate business so that you could bring business in and help build the firm. After I left that firm, I worked for retired Judge Pat Banks. And when she hired me, it was as an independent contractor. And she had also explained to me about running a business. So that was an added element about participating, about networking, about knowing who to talk to and developing relationships so you could generate business. After I worked for Pat Banks, I was in the state's attorney's office. And at the state's attorney's office, I was supervisor over child support enforcement. And then I was supervisor over property tax. Judge Dave Erickson was the one who encouraged me and appointed me to pushed me to those particular positions. So he encouraged me and supported me while I was there. And at the state's attorney's office, I did run for judge, ran for full circuit. I did not win, but the lesson I learned was that you do establish relationships and you get to know people, and you need a lot of exposure. As Judy had indicated, I was the Alumni Association president, but I also, during that period of time, was president of the Women's Bar Association, as well as the Black Women Lawyers Association. So what I've learned to do is to join and participate and get the exposure that those positions allow, because that's what you do need. People need to know your name, see your face, see that you do good work. While I was at the state's attorney's office, and after I had lost the election, I started to consider what I needed to do next. And at happenstance, I went to the inauguration in Springfield, and I was walking through the Capitol building, and I passed by Lisa Madigan. And we had known each other over the years, but she really didn't know what I did as an attorney. And so we were chit-chatting, and she was about to become Attorney General. And so she said, send me your resume. And so a couple of weeks after I did that, she did give me the position of Deputy Attorney General over child support enforcement. And so that gave me further exposure to travel throughout the state and talk about child support to various groups, community groups and attorneys, and work with the Illinois Department of Public Aid, as it was called at that time. Then, let's see what happened. But it took me 12 years to become an associate judge. I had been on 3 different short lists, and I was on the 3rd one. And as it turned out, when the list came out, I was in Arizona, up in the mountains. So I didn't even know I made the short list. And when I came down out of the mountains, I'm looking at my phone, I had all kinds of messages. And at that point, I was 3 days behind everybody else because I didn't even know I'd been put on the list. So I had to hit the ground running. So you have to learn to be prepared and just get things done as quickly as you possibly can when you have those kind of situations that you got to do something. So you get on top of it and you get the job done. But part of that is knowing political people. So you need to know who your alderman is, who your committeeman is. You know other, elected officials that are in the political process, as well as in the judiciary committees for the county and for the city. But that's the point, that either you can become elected, you run full circuit, your constituency is people, the general population, or you become appointed, which I am an associate judge, and the constituency is the full circuit judges of Cook County. So you have to decide early on what path you want to take, because they have a different, they have a different element, but they all involve money. So you always need money because you have to buy tickets, you have to go to meetings, you have to go to functions, but you want your family involved because they need to support you in any way they can, because sometimes you have late nights, so somebody has to come in and cook for the kids or feed the kids or just keep your house clean. So you need to get your family involved. I would say the other thing is you have to have a good reputation, because you want people to think well of you when they hear your name. So make sure you have a good reputation. I would say you got to have a plan. Set your goal and start working towards that. And you definitely need to write it down, because when opportunities present themselves, you have to be able to take those opportunities and go forward with them. So you need to make sure you write things down. Let's see. And developing relationships, always maintain good relationships. Don't burn any bridges. I'll also say have a good attitude, because sometimes things don't go your way, but you find another angle and do something different, and then get back to the path that you really want to be on. And never be afraid to ask for help. Always ask for help if you need it. And finally, I would say just never give up. Thank you.
That's great advice, Judge Ball-Reed. You mentioned something I think that's important because with all of our panelists, we have a lot of diversity. And you mentioned something at the beginning about growing up on the West Side and being the first in your family. How important was that in your thought process about becoming a judge, and why was that important to you?
Well, I wanted to be a good role model. And when I was younger, of course, it was back in '68, the riots had hit. And unfortunately, there was a army tank on the corner of my block. And it was very scary. And as I grew up, I wanted to understand what could I do to help. And that's why I became a lawyer, how I could be of service. And then once I became an attorney, and I've been practicing for 25 years, I started to think, what could I do next? And that was the road to the Robe, just trying to figure out ways to accomplish that goal, and talking to friends and getting information.
Great. Well, I'd like to introduce our next panelist, who I've also had the pleasure of working with as a judge, and that's Judge Celia Gamrath. Judge Gamrath is also a graduate of UIC John Marshall Law School. Judge Gamrath is a former judicial law clerk for the Honorable Thomas R. Rakowski of the First District Appellate Court of Illinois. She was also a partner at Schiller, DeCanto, and Fleck LLP, concentrating in matrimonial law and appeals on behalf of individuals whose cases mainly involved the distribution of multi-million-dollar holdings and required sophisticated financial expertise. She was appointed to a vacancy in the 8th Subcircuit and won election from the 8th Subcircuit in 2010 to the Cook County Circuit Court, where she serves currently in the Chancery Division. Judge Gamrath, can you tell us about your path to the bench?
Sure. So thank you all for being here. Like Judge Rice and Judge Patrice Ball-Reed, I owe a great debt of gratitude to Judge Marshall and the colleagues who are on this panel today. Becoming a judge was, quite frankly, never a dream when I was a little girl. For my family, who has very little formal education, the first step was just going to college. That was a big deal. And from there, it really was a dream to go on to law school. My parents really talked to me deeply about getting a good education. And with that comes responsibility and privilege, and the opportunity to serve and to do more for the community, to make your family proud. But above all, they emphasized, do what you love and follow your heart. So I loved research. I loved writing. When I went to law school, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I loved everything about the academics. And so my first job out of law school was for a judge in the appellate court. Becoming a judicial law clerk is really an extension of law school, but that opportunity introduced me to what being a judge was all about. It introduced me to judges who gave me great recommendations, but it really taught me to hone in on critical thinking skills, analytical skills. It taught me civility. It taught me how to hear both sides. And it really gave me the objective standpoint that you don't get in private practice. So that credential, I think, really gave me the advantage when it came time for me to become a judge, because I worked for judges. I knew how their thinking process worked. And I saw lawyers, I saw the best and I saw the worst, and I saw witnesses on the stand, and I saw judging of credibility, and I saw about deep dives into research and issues and the broader ramifications of cases. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went on to practice law. And I think for those who want to become a judge, practicing law in a courtroom is really so important, because as a judge, that's what we do every single day. There is the intellectual component, but it is practical skills. It's administrative skills. It's knowing the rules of evidence, rules of civil procedure. And the more experienced and comfortable you are in a courtroom, the better off you're going to be as a judge. So as Judge Rice said, I practiced law for Schiller to Canton Fleck. I did some trial work, mainly really intricate dispositive motions. I did a lot of discovery, but my niche really was in the appellate court. I had the privilege to take cases all the way up to the Supreme Court and do a little bit of federal practice as well. Because I appeared before appellate judges and Supreme Court judges, they got to know me a little bit, not only through my professional practice, but also through my Bar Association activities, including John Marshall Alumni Association. One of my great mentors and friends is Justice Judith Rice, who we worked closely with through the Alumni Association. I watched and I observed judges, really, quite frankly, again, thinking this is way out of my league, but always respected and admired what they were doing as public servants. So my career ended up going full circle from judicial law clerk to private practitioner to getting appointed to a vacancy. And then, as Judge Rice said, I had to run to keep that spot. And Justice Reyes, who was already on the bench, said to me one day, you know, how do you like the running thing? It's really difficult, right? It's all in. You're taking time away from your family, but you only want to do it once. Give it your all, do it right. And I've never forgotten those words. And not only in terms of running to become a judge, but how you conduct yourself every single day. You get that one shot, right? And we're here, and it's this opportunity, not to have this great self-indulgent position. The position is very, very important. I just hold the role, and the role is truly to serve and to make, like I said, my family proud, my colleagues proud, John Marshall proud, but to serve the public who come to you in the most humbling ways with their problems, expecting you to solve them. So my thought behind becoming a judge was really that opportunity, give a voice to those who don't have one when I was an advocate, and then listen to both sides once I got that privilege to become a judge. So this was sort of my path. I would encourage those who are interested in becoming a judge to do what Patrice Ball Reed said, and that is get out there, network, get to know people, get to know judges, get to know lawyers. Those are the ones who will be recommending you or not recommending you to sit on the bench. How you treat people in law school, how you treat people in private practice, or if you're a government practitioner, matters. I was fully vetted by the Bar Associations, as was everyone on this panel, and people have the opportunity to really talk candidly about you, how you were then, what you're like now, and what they think you will be like when you are a judge. So I think kindness matters. I think civility and respect matters. When you are an advocate, you should go to the mat for your client, but don't make it personal. Be one of those lawyers who could be trusted by the other side. Be one of those lawyers who shakes hands at the end of a case. Stand up for your client, but also recognize that you have an ethical obligation to do what is right, and don't be pushed over that line, because some of the most important skills of being a judge is integrity, truthfulness, hard work, candor, ethics, legal knowledge, experience, common sense, and just decency. That is what people want, and that's what they expect. So my compilation of coming from a modest upbringing where education was really instilled as a privilege kind of set me towards the path of becoming a lawyer, and then being exposed to so many judges who I wanted to emulate and respected so deeply really drove my decision to do what I'm doing now.
Wow, Judge Gamreth, you said a few really important things. One of the things you said, what you're talking about are the criteria that the bar associations are going to use, because everyone who's going to become a judge has to be vetted by the bar associations, both the Alliance and Chicago Bar. And so you listed out the criteria that they're going to utilize. Did you think about that when you were building your resume, and how you were going to show how those criteria fit your work and your life and yourself?
Naively, no, because again, Judge Rice, I've been on the bench since 2010. I pinch myself almost every day thinking, this is really an incredible opportunity. But what I did do was try to, as a lawyer, take those skills, and those skills are those of knowledge, hard work, preparation. It's so important to be prepared, prepared in law school and prepared beyond. In terms of credentialing myself to become a judge, I think that if you love what you do as a lawyer and you're good at it, and you follow the hard skills of legal knowledge and the soft skills that we discussed, you're going to be on that path towards becoming a judge. I remember when I was young, I was doing a lot of stuff in the bar associations, truly because I enjoyed it. I found friends in the bar associations. We were doing good work. We were doing philanthropy. We were writing legislation. It was really exciting stuff. A malady of sorts, quite frankly. And I would have people say, oh, you're doing this to be a judge. And when I was young, I thought, what are they talking about? This is a really great opportunity. And it dates back to what my parents said about, do what's right, be a good person, find what you love, because you're going to work really hard. So you want to love it, and you will be successful. So I fell in love with the law. I fell in love with networking, being a part of bar associations, being in this atmosphere where I have that opportunity. And in hindsight, you are exactly right. Building that judicial resume was kind of organic for me, but that's exactly how you do it, with those relationships, people knowing they could trust you, seeing you in the courtroom, knowing you're prepared, knowing you're right and you're smart and you're hardworking. For the law students out there, your reputation starts day one, because the people on the right and the left of you in class, those are going to be your colleagues, they're going to be your adversaries, they're going to be your judges. They don't forget, they're going to remember what you were like in law school. Could they trust you? Were you taking shortcuts? Were you working hard? That level of morality and trust is so incredibly important, I think today, now more than ever. And just the human respect and decency that you show to others. That's how people want to be treated. And like many of us on this call, like we come from families where perhaps it wasn't an automatic that you were going to go on to college or graduate school or become a lawyer, or certainly not a judge. So with that was instilled really early on. And I think that John Marshall students have that instilled really early on, because what I find in John Marshall lawyers, law students, some of my law clerks, some of my dearest friends, you are hardworking. You have grit, you have integrity, you are there for opportunity. And with that is going to come that responsibility to help others, and to do what's right and to do what's just. So I think that those on this call are probably naturals for this type of career path to do really good work. And it takes perseverance, it takes endurance. A friend of all of ours has once said, it's education, it's community engagement, and it's endurance. It doesn't always happen when you think it's going to happen. These things take time. So just persevere if you think that this is something that you would be well suited for, and make sure that you're going to love it, because you're going to spend a lot of hours studying those briefs and working hard and campaigning to ultimately get to where you are. So with that, I would just say, keep in touch with those relationships. The people at John Marshall have been incredibly supportive of my career. They have given me big shoulders to stand on. They have trusted me. And in turn, so many John Marshall alums try to pull up John Marshall students and alums. Dean Dickerson is out of this world fabulous in terms of working with students to get them positioned with alums to get them on the right path, and find a good mentor. I was very blessed to have really good mentors who set me on the right path. So just go with your conscience, go with your guide. And I think that those are kind of the keys towards setting your path to building your judicial resume.
Great, thank you, Celia. Judge David Navarro, I know you know about perseverance because I met you when you were coming through the associate process. So I want to introduce Judge David Navarro. Judge Navarro served in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, becoming supervisor of the Professional Standards Unit, and as chief of the Public Integrity Bureau for the Office of the Illinois Attorney General. He was appointed by Justice Mary Jane Tice of the Illinois Supreme Court as a Cook County Circuit Judge from a vacancy in the 4th Subcircuit. He stood for election and became the first Hispanic elected from a suburban subcircuit to the Cook County Circuit Court. So Judge Navarro, tell us about your path and how you became a judge.
Thanks, Judge Rice. And similar to the panelists that have spoken here, first, thanks to Dean Dickerson for having this event. I went to this event when we could go to events in person when I was an aspiring judge, and Judge Gamrath was speaking at that event. I remember listening and I think taking notes or talking to her about it afterwards. And she was very gracious, just as she is now, and giving of her time. So my path, Judge Rice described it. I was appointed in 2017, elected in 2018. But I did, similar to Judge Ball Reed, I was on the associate list. I had probably put in for the associate list 2 or 3 times, applied 2 or 3 times before I made the short list. I think that was in 2016. But unlike Judge Ball Reed, I didn't make it off the short list. But I met so many good judges. You think after, I think at that point I had practiced for 20 some years, you think you know all the judges. There's a lot of judges in Cook County. And you think, I've practiced, I know these judges, I've been to bar events. You don't know the judges until you go and run around the county for 2 weeks and try and meet all the circuit court judges. And then you realize how many of the judges you haven't met. And one of the judges I got a chance to meet was so nice with Judge Rice. And really, the truth is, so many of the judges are so nice when you meet them and you introduce yourself to them. But what I learned there is it's hard to meet the judges when you're on the associate list and then make the ask, because ultimately that's what you're doing when you're on the associate list. You're campaigning and you're making the ask, vote for me. That's your electorate. And I learned a lot there about how I needed to meet. If I was going to ask these judges to vote for me, I needed to make an effort to get to know more of them better. And I did. I was in the course of doing that when one of the judges I met, Judge Davey, let me know at one of the bar events that he'd be retiring and a vacancy would be opening up in the 4th Subcircuit, and I should apply for that. And I said, of course I will apply for that. Just like when someone tells you the lottery is at 500 million, you should play. Yes, I will. Of course, I will play because that's what you do. But I applied and I worked very hard in the application, but I didn't go into that thinking that was mine for the asking. Because similar to Judge Gamera, similar to Judge Paul Reed, I never would have imagined becoming a judge when I was in law school, much less as a young attorney practicing. It just was something that seemed so far out of reach. I had the opportunity to practice for so many good judges as a state's attorney and then as an assistant attorney general. And it was seeing those judges as I pursued my career in public service. I did some time as a defense attorney also, that led me to want to serve. And I felt that it really was the best way, or the best way that a lawyer could serve, that I knew, the public and the public trust as a judge. And I was fortunate enough to get elected. Justice Reyes is absolutely right. It is something you only want to do once. It is a tremendous amount of effort. That's for a subcircuit. Forget about countywide. This subcircuit, my subcircuit is kind of the western suburbs from Franklin Park down to Worth, Palos Park. It is a tremendous time commitment. I was very fortunate to have the commitment of my wife and my family, not only supporting me, but out there knocking on doors, getting signatures, working polling places, friends and family. Man, we leaned on everybody, and we're so fortunate. It is to prevail. You know, everyone has touched on this. I think the knowledge and skills of being a good judge are really ultimately what I've heard and what I believe is it's the same knowledge and skills of being a good lawyer. So that means, just like Judge Gamera said, building your trial skills, because the bar groups are going to want to know that you can hear a trial. It means building good relationships, just like you've heard. Though your reputation absolutely starts at the early part of your career, if not in law school, because those lawyers who I practiced in front of as a misdemeanor assistant were there helping me when I wanted to be an associate judge, and ultimately then when I wanted to be a circuit judge. Those bar activities help get you known outside of your practice area. You may be a great lawyer, in fact, in your practice group, but outside of that practice area, whether it's criminal or domestic relations or probate, attorneys may not know you. And those bar activities, being active, like Judge Gamerath was, being active in those bar groups, whatever it is, the ISBA, the CBA, I was active in the Hispanic Lawyers Association. Any one of those, being active in there and contributing to those will get you known outside of just your practice area. Teaching, mentoring, judging trial competitions, all those things will make you a better lawyer and ultimately will serve you when you want to be a judge. I wish I could say that I went about this trying to, with the plan that I was leveraging those relationships and those activities with this ultimate plan of being a judge. And it was really just fortune that those activities then served me well later when I went in for associate and ultimately ran.
So you have a distinction of being the first Hispanic from a suburban district. It would have been easy for you to be discouraged after, the associate process. What can you say to people about that? Then you go on and you have a distinction after that.
Boy, after you get punched in the gut, it is a very public thing when you don't make the shortlist, right, Patrice? Right? When you don't you make the list and then you don't make it, it's very public. But I was so fortunate to really go back to the judges I had met and talk to them and say, what could I have done differently? What would you say? And I learned everyone was really very giving of their time. And I would say I stand on the shoulders of judges like Justice Reyes, who ran before me, and other Latino judges who ran before me. I was not a groundbreaker by any measure. I was there. I was able to accomplish what I accomplished because other people came before me and did the heavy lifting so that I could accomplish what I accomplished. But it really is because of those that came before me. And I want to give a chance to Justice Reyes to tell us his story before I drone on anymore.
Okay. Well, Justice Reyes, we saved you for last for a reason.
Thank you.
Because we are all circuit court judges, but you have elevated to the appellate court. So I would like for you to talk about that process, but I want to introduce you first. Justice Jesse Reyes is a graduate of both UIC and UIC John Marshall Law School. Justice Reyes was in private practice in a personal injury firm and then served the city of Chicago and the Corporation Counsel's office. He was elected by the judges of the Circuit Court of Cook County as an associate judge in 1997. He then ran for election to the Cook County Circuit Court as a full circuit court judge. He became the first Latinx individual elected to the appellate court in 2012. So Justice Reyes, please tell us about your path to the bench and the appellate court.
Well, thank you, Judge Rice, and thank you for that nice introduction. And it's a pleasure to be with my fellow panelists, dear friends, not only on the bench, but off the bench. And, I want to say thank you to the Dean, and I welcome all the participants. And I want to thank Judge Navarro and Judge Gammer for that nice little shout out. So of you that are listening to these conversations right now, maybe already decided you want to become judges. Some of you may be on the fence. Some of you might think it's not for you. But I would tell you to pursue it. Pursue trying to have a career on the bench. In the long run, you're gonna benefit as an attorney and as a member of the legal profession, because as you've heard from the other speakers this evening, to become a judge, you have to expand your education. You have to expand your experiences, and you also have to expand your networks, which makes you a more well-rounded practitioner, makes you more of a individual that is aware of what's going on, not only in the legal profession, but in communities at large. And that's what judges need. Judges need to be sensitive to the issues that are going on in their communities. They have to be aware of what's going on in their communities, because that's part and parcel of what goes into making the decisions. And that's one of the things you're going to ultimately have to do is, you're going to be presented with the facts and the evidence, and you're going to have to make a decision. And so that's one of the things that you're going to be critiqued by the bar associations, and also, if you run as an associate judge, by the members of the Chief Judge's Executive Committee, and then the other judges that are going to vote for you. They want to know, are you someone that's going to be a good listener? Are you someone that's going to have the proper demeanor and respect with regards to people who appear in front of you, whether if they're represented by counsel or not? And then ultimately, you're going to be able to make those difficult decisions, which a lot of the judges that are here this evening have to make on a daily basis. But to back up a little bit, my background, I was born and raised in the city of Chicago. I come from a blue-collar family, blue-collar neighborhood. I'm the son of immigrants. And I always wanted to be a lawyer. That's what my dream was ever since I could remember. That's why I wanted to be a lawyer. And I think the thing about it that really kind of interested me was the fact that lawyers speak for those who can't speak for themselves. They're the ones that defends people's rights in the courtrooms and outside the courtrooms. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to get in there and I want to do that as well. And then John Marshall provided me the opportunity to do that. I had to work while I was going to school, and a lot of the schools in the Chicagoland area that I applied to, it wasn't going to be possible to do that. Work and then also go to law school. But John Marshall provided me that opportunity, and I've always been very thankful to John Marshall for that, because they got me on the road and to fulfill my dream. And at John Marshall, I started pursuing the goal of becoming a litigator. I would go to the Daily Center. I would go over to the federal court building, and I would watch trials. I watched judges and lawyers, arguing motions and trials. And during my first year, a lot of times I really didn't know what I was really watching or what was going on. But it was just being in there and watching the demeanor of what was going on and how the judges were conducting themselves and how they conducted their courtrooms. And then I got involved in mock trial competitions after I took the appropriate courses, and moot court competitions, locally, regionally, and nationally. I learned a lot from those experiences. And so then I went to work at a personal injury firm, and was working there, and I was doing well, but I realized I wasn't going to get the trial experience that I wanted to get, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get trial experience. So I went to the Corporation Counsel's office when Mayor Hal Washington was the mayor, and Jim Montgomery gave me the opportunity, someone that had never even tried a jury trial, to start trying cases in the law division, and then also trying cases in federal court. From there, I went on to the Board of Education when the City of Chicago first was able to take over the Board of Education and worked in the policy and reform area. So, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to take opportunities that come along and volunteer. I did that in law school, joining teams and participating. And then also, in my places of employment. I was fortunate that at the City of Chicago, was one of the first selected to try a multi-million-dollar cases for the Corporation Counsel's office. And that's because I took the opportunity to work with someone that was an outside counsel and learn, how to try those type of cases. And, I didn't know where it was going to take me, but I figured, I'm going to expand my experience, and hopefully that'll, help me along the way. I didn't start out wanting to be a judge. I mean, I love trying cases. It was something that I really enjoyed. But there does come a point in time in your career where you decide, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to, go work in a large firm? Do I want to open up my own office? Do I want to run for office? But as was said earlier, judges are public servants. And, giving back to the community was something that always spoke to me. And that was something I've always done is give back to the community. As Judge Gammer had mentioned, we were very involved in the Alumni Association. And, we made sure that we always, were very active in the Alumni Association throughout the years. And I think that's, what judges do. Judges are public servants, not only on the bench, but they're public servants off the bench. So that spoke to me, and I decided that was the path I wanted to take, as a path to the bench. Along the way, fortunately, I'd kept track of everything that I was doing. One of the things that I think we'll all agree is that when you decide you want to become a judge, you have to become a pack rat. You have to save everything, because when you fill out those applications, you have to list all the trials, all the motions, if you've done arbitrations, mediations, and you also have to keep track of who your opposing counsels were on all these items. And then it falls on you to make sure you give them their most recent telephone numbers, their email addresses, their addresses where they could be reached by the bar associations. So you have to save all of this information as the years go along, because when you're going to be asked to fill out the application, you have to put that in there as well, in terms of presentations that you've made, speeches that you've given, schools that you've gone to talk to. All of this helps because they want to see who you are. And, if you could present a well-rounded resume, I think that'll help you, particularly as you run as an associate, because an associate, you're not running politically, you're just putting out your experiences and your education, and you're being vetted along those lines. When you run for election as a circuit court judge, that's a little bit different. There is a little more politics involved in that in terms of getting to know your committeemen and getting to know the top ranking people within the party. So that part of it is important. And each time that I've moved along in the judiciary, I've run for the office. I ran for associate judge like Judge Navarro and Ball Reed and Judge Gamrith, and I've also ran for circuit court. As was mentioned, I was the first Latino to win an election countywide for the Circuit Court of Cook County, and then also the same for the appellate court. I was the first Latino elected to the appellate court. But as Judge Navarro said, I was the first to that, but there was a lot of other people that opened up the doors for me, and one of them was Judge David Serta, who was appointed to the appellate court. We stayed in touch. He always, he was always a mentor of mine, helping me along the way and giving me advice. Judge Rakowski, who Judge Gamrith worked with, was one of my mentors, particularly when I was running for associate judge. And one of the points I want to make also is that don't feel you need to know everything. My background before I went on the bench was all civil. I tried cases in federal court and state court, but I never went to 26th Street to try a case. So I didn't have a criminal background. And that was one of my concerns. All of a sudden I'm looking at my resume. I'm like, oops, I don't have a criminal background. And Judge Rakowski and others were like, don't worry about it. This is, you'll be fine. This is, that's only part and parcel. And they were right. So you don't have to know everything, but you should try to develop your education and experience and your networks as much as possible, because those are going to be necessary for you to get through, and particularly when you're being vetted by the bar associations and the judges if you run for associate judge. And I would recommend also get involved in the bar associations, but particularly in the judicial evaluation committees, because it's you're on the one side asking the questions, and so that when you walk into the room, you'll be able to kind of get an idea of what they're going to ask you, where the questions are going to be coming from, what are they looking for. As a quick aside, when I ran for associate judge, on the day that I went for my interview, I was the last one to be interviewed that day, and it was at 4:30 in the afternoon. And you don't want to have that 4:30 spot. You're like, So I went in there and I realized that, because I had been there, I knew what it was like being on the other side. So, I answered all the questions, but I try to keep it, fast as possible. At the same time, answering all the questions. And then when I got up and I walked out, I heard people kind of chuckling, and I was like, I didn't end with a joke, so I didn't know what the joke was. So I was found qualified, and years later, I ran into a couple of people that were in the room when I was interviewed, and I was, I went up to them, because I was dying to know what, was so funny, and I said, so I have to ask you. So when I went in for my interview, everybody was kind of laughing, when I was walking out the door in the building of the Chicago Bar Association. And for some of you that have had that experience of going into those rooms, how the doors open, all right? They don't normally open the other way. They have to kind of push them out. And they said, I was the only one that day that they had that knew which way the door swung. So it just goes to show you, that's how involved I was and how active I was with those judicial evaluation committees. And so, it pays to know which way the door swings,
Nice.
Thank you, Justice Reyes. And we gave you the 4:30 spot again because
I know.
we've got to wrap up our panel, and I want to have a little time for questions. And maybe we let you answer the first question that comes in. I don't know if Chris, can you see the questions that are coming in?
Yes, we have a question that came in earlier. I'll get that for you.
Okay.
Is it best to run circuit-wide or apply for associate judge and hopefully get appointed? From Arlette Porter.
We're going to let Justice Reyes answer that since.
Well, I think we're fortunate in the state of Illinois that, you know, there are different ways you could get on the bench, and the associate judge route, the circuit court judge, or appointment. So if you're interested in going on the bench, depending on, you know, where you live, you know, you might want to send a letter to the Supreme Court and indicate that you're interested in a possible appointment if one should ever come along. Make sure you indicate, you know, where you live, what subcircuit you live in, and you know, inform them, and, you know, attach your resume. You never know. I mean, you know, lightning might strike, and a vacancy may occur. You know, like Judge Navarro was fortunate to find out, you know, that there was a vacancy in subcircuit, but sometimes we don't know, you know, when a vacancy is going to open up in a subcircuit, or who's going to be making the appointment. That's something that the Supreme Court always kind of keeps very close to the vest. They never let you really kind of know ahead of time, you know, who's going to be making the appointments. But it doesn't hurt to put it out there and see if there's a possibility of getting an appointment. But, you know, I mean, I loved being an associate judge. It was great. It was an exciting time. So, you know, if you don't have the means and the funds, if you feel really you don't have the political connections, then do the associate judge route. And then you just kind of, you know, work your way through the system and get to know people and expand your networks, and then maybe possibly run for circuit court. But, you know, either way, you know, the distinction between associate and circuit, other than voting for the associate judge candidates, Judge Evans has done a great job in terms of making sure that everybody has a lot of the same responsibilities and are able to try a lot of different, hear a lot of different type of cases. Back when I started out, you couldn't go to 26th Street and hear any felony cases, but that has long gone by the wayside. And now, you know, associates are hearing felony cases, murder cases, as well as circuit judges are. I hope I answered the question.
Great. Another question from our audience.
Yes, this is from Pamela Ingersoll Sandin. How do you overcome not having a lot of trial experience, just experience with administrative tribunals, which still requires trial aspects because you have worked for local government entities?
That's a great question. Anyone want to tackle that question?
So I'm going to chime in because I sit in general chancery, and part of my call is reviewing administrative decisions. So administrative hearing officers really do act as that judicial tribunal. You are evaluating the credibility of witnesses, you are taking in evidence, you are doing motions. So I would say emphasize that aspect of it, that you are trained to think like a judge, because while you are not a judicial officer, you are in that forum that is very similarly situated to what you would expect in the trial courts.
Correct. Are there any other questions?
Judge Rice, we have one final question from Marcus Corona. Is experience the biggest factor in terms of years?
Judge Navarro, do you want to take a stab at that one? Is experience the biggest factor?
I don't think it's the biggest factor. It's a gateway factor, just in terms of if you're gonna get an evaluation from the bar associations. I don't remember if it's a minimum of 12 years or a minimum. It's a minimum of, anyone could chime in there, but it's a minimum of X number of years. And if you don't have those minimum number of years, you're not going to get a recommendation from the bar groups. Once you get past that minimum number of years, it's really what you've done with those years that you've been practicing. Have you been involved? Have you been practicing? Have you been doing trials? It's everything else that we've been talking about. But the years really just speak to
Right. So I would say it's quality, not quantity. What you do with your years, what you do with your life is what you make of it. But to Judge Navarro's point, I think that it's going to be very difficult to get past bar associations with anything less than a dozen years. I think that it might be a 10-year minimum.
10 years.
Under 10, you're automatically found not recommended. So that would be a hurdle to overcome. So you might it might behoove you to at least pass that time threshold.
And from a practical standpoint, as Justice Roberts mentioned when he was being interviewed by the Senate, is, your job is to call the balls and strikes, but it helps to have been out in the field. And I think that's important to keep in mind. When I was an associate judge, I volunteered I went to the chief judge and I said, if anybody dies, retires, gets sick, goes on vacation, and you need anybody to fill in, I'm your person. And they took me up on that. And for the first 3 years while I was an associate, I was traveling around the county, sitting in a variety of different, assignments. And now on the appellate court, because all we do is we see the record, and sometimes the record is not totally complete, but having been in those courtrooms, having been in those situations that some of the trial judges have been, I kind of get a sense of what was happening, what was going on, and it helps me in terms of ultimately making a decision. So I think experience, to a certain extent, being in these courtrooms and trying cases, it helps. It's not a do-all or end-all, but I think it helps you. If you could get it, I would definitely recommend getting it.
Well, great. I want to thank this panel. Thank you for all of your comments and insights. And I think, Chris, we can give them all a hand. And I think, Dean, if you want to come in and close this out, I don't know if you're back. Dean Dickerson.
I am. Thank you to this panel for a great discussion. We are going to start the next panel right at 6 o'clock. So if you need to take a quick break, please do so. We'll allow some others to come on in. We'll hopefully see you back in a few minutes. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Darby Dickerson. I'm the Dean at UIC John Marshall. Thank you for being here for part 2 of our Robe to the Road to the Robes panel this evening. We just had a really fantastic first session on building a judicial resume. This panel, the 6 o'clock panel, is titled Becoming a Cook County Judge. This panel, our guests will be discussing preparations to run a county-wide or sub-circuit seat, presenting credentials to the Illinois Supreme Court for a Supreme Court appointment to the bench, and presenting credentials to the circuit judges in Cook County to get elected as an associate judge. Once again, moderating this panel is our own Judge Judith Rice, class of 1988. Judge Rice was the first female commissioner of 2 of Chicago's largest government agencies and served as senior vice president of BMO Harris Bank before she was elected judge in the Cook County Circuit Court's 7th Subcircuit. She also serves in the UIC John Marshall Alumni Council and successfully won retention in the 2020 election, and we congratulate you on that. Judge Rice, I will turn this panel over to you.
Thank you, Dean Dickerson. Again, Dean, I really want to thank you for inviting me to moderate these panels and for putting these panels together. Our first panel had a really exciting discussion on how and why they became judges and some great advice on building your judicial resume, some things that people might want to consider doing as they think about becoming a judge. Now with this panel, we have some experts in the mechanics of becoming a judge. And I'd like for this panel to drill down a little bit into the process a bit more. We heard about many of the judges and their journeys. We heard about the idea that there are many ways to become a judge in Cook County. Number one, you could be appointed as an associate judge by judicial peers or judges that are serving as full circuit judges. You can run for the office either countywide or in a subcircuit. And I don't know that people have a clear understanding of how the subcircuits work and why they were created. So if someone could speak to that, that would be great. We have had some questions about how much politics plays into this, and do you have to be political, and what is this process like? So I would love for each of the panelists to think about comments you might make about some of these questions. So I'm going to, the format is we're going to introduce each panelist, and then would love you to spend 3 to 5 minutes talking about your career or any issues that you think are pertinent for our participants to know about the mechanics of becoming a judge in Cook County. So our first panelist is Justice Matthias DeLort. Justice DeLort is a graduate of UIC John Marshall, was a private practice attorney involved in election and municipal law. He represented hundreds of candidates
Doesn't have
seeking
my
election.
picture.
He's current editor of the ICL for Election Law. He was appointed as an
Came on now,
associate
thanks.
judge. I think that's Mr. Nally coming in.
Yes, hi, sorry,
Hi,
a little
Jeff.
technical problem.
Okay, we got you now. All right, and Justice DeLort was appointed as an associate judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County in 2007 and served almost exclusively in the Chancery Division of that court. Justice DeLort was elected to the Appellate Court in 2012 and has served as presiding justice of the First Division. Justice DeLort, welcome, and love for you to tell us a little bit about your road to the bench in the appellate court and what that process was like for you.
Well, thank you very much, Judge Rice. I'm happy to be here on this great panel this evening. I could probably summarize it very briefly. I've had 2 judicial roles, really. One was my 5 years as an associate judge of the circuit court, and then my 8 years now on the appellate court. And they were certainly different roads. The first one, to become an associate judge, as many of you heard in the last hour, it's an interesting process. You go around to 225 voting circuit judges. There's an application process that opens up every couple years, and you really don't bother applying unless you've got a lot of experience behind you and you've been found qualified by the various bar associations. Because if you have not had either of those characteristics, it's very easy for the judges simply to throw you out to the bottom of the list, and they really don't want to waste their time with you. So a lot of the associate judge candidates are people that are very experienced and very experienced in the courtroom. I always also tell lawyers that if you're sitting at that table that Judge Reyes talked to you about a few minutes ago, with all those presiding judges to be interviewed, if nobody in the room knows who you are, you're going to have some trouble. You can't have practiced your whole career in, let's say, McHenry County, and then say, well, I want to become an associate judge in Cook County. If none of the Cook County judges know who you are, you're going to have a very difficult time with that. The process of becoming an associate judge is, you get your bar ratings, you get to the panel of presiding judges, which they call the short list. And if there are, for instance, 8 vacancies, there'll be 16 on the short list. And then those 16 get 2 weeks to run around to all the 225 voting circuit judges. And I got to about 200 of them in 2 weeks, personal face-to-face visits. And they know you're coming. They make hours for you to come and see them. You do a very quick interview. They already have your resume. They already have your cover letter because you've sent it to them. And that's one of the things you have to do, is make sure you get a resume and a cover letter out. And unlike everything else in the human resources world, this is where you do put your picture in your resume, because there are so many candidates. The judges often get people mixed up, and a picture helps them sort out by whom they were impressed and by whom they were not impressed. After 5 years of that, I ran for election for the appellate court. If we have time later, I'll go into the whole thing about going to the party slating and being a runner-up and a standby candidate for the following 2-year cycle. But the bottom line was that I was a standby candidate. I was interviewed by the 80 committeemen. I had been reevaluated by all the bar associations, both for circuit court and for an appellate court spot. And I told the committee I was making myself available for either position. And as it turned out, I was made a standby candidate for appellate court, and figured, well, it's very unlikely I'll get picked because it's such a small court, it's unlikely there'll be a last-minute vacancy. But guess what? There was. And I was swept up with about 24 hours notice, and I was off and running for the appellate court. And that is an experience that will be in my memoirs one day. But the bottom line was that I had 3 months to campaign. And in 3 months, I did 152 campaign appearances all over Cook County, to every chicken dinner and bake sale and Boy Scout troop and parade you can imagine, because you're just trying to get out there and meet people and say hello and get your name out there, because there really is not enough money in the world to try to get on TV for a seat like a seat on the Illinois Appellate Court. And I was able to win in a 6-way race with 25% of the vote, just barely squeaked through there. And I've been on the appellate court since.
Wow. So, what you're saying is, did you specifically decide that you wanted to go for the appellate court, or did that happen organically in some way? Or?
Well, it happened a little bit organically. I was trying to get promoted from associate to circuit.
Okay.
Because for one thing, there's a pay raise, but more importantly, it would have helped me get out of the assignment I was in that I really was fairly desperate to get out of, and I was not being moved. So I was hoping that if I got elected as a circuit judge, the chief judge would transfer me. And I was a standby candidate in 2010, and there were no vacancies for me to run for. In 2012, I was again made a standby candidate, but they made me a standby for appellate court. At that point, I had highly qualified ratings for the appellate court, and perhaps they thought that it was a better fit for me. The other part of the process I heard was, well, you're already a judge. We don't want to just move you to circuit. That deprives someone else who wants to get their foot in the door of a spot, whereas the appellate court was more of an open seat.
Good, good. Well, I'd like to hear more from you a little later about the other issues we want to discuss also, Justice DeLorde. But right now I'm going to move to Justice Nathaniel House. Justice Nathaniel House Sr. is a graduate of UIC John Marshall as well. Following in his father's footsteps, Justice House attended Northwestern University School of Law and became an attorney upon his graduation. His practice focused on election law to ensure that underdogs who wanted their voice heard weren't knocked off the ballot by the Cook County machine. Justice House was lead attorney for the Harold Washington Party, where he worked to ensure that candidates from every community had a fair shot to run for office. He was elected to the Cook County Circuit Court in 1998, where he served with distinction until 2009. In 2010, he ascended to Justice of the Illinois Appellate Court, where he still serves today. Justice House,
yes.
Give us your advice on becoming a judge in Cook County.
Well, I'd like to tell you that I had planned my career from the beginning, but I have to say that my career as a judge evolved organically. As you stated earlier, most of my career was in private practice. And in the last few years, I focused on election law. And during that time, I was a member of what they call the Election Law Committee. We had Matt DeLorde, Carrie Lynn, Jim Nally. We all served on that Election Law Committee of the Chicago Bar. And that's how I became a judge, oddly enough. You know, I represented candidates. I opposed candidates as well in my career as an election law attorney. And so we had a seminar every 2 years rather, how to become a judge. And I got 2 or 3 clients at that seminar. I was a participant. And one of the clients was a young man. He came to me and said, listen, House, I've been a lawyer for X number of years, a state's attorney. I've done 40 jury trials, which is a heck of a lot, of course. And but I want to become a judge. Would you help me? So I sat him down and we went through the usual stuff. And on the way out the door, he turned around, look, House, I spent so much time being a lawyer. I don't know any politicians. And can you help with that? And I said, well, let me do something. So I called up at that point a member of the Cook County Democratic Party, Bill Beavers, who at that time was vice chair. And I had met him because I had opposed him. I had represented people who ran against him. I never represented. And I was always polite. I always won every case. My clients didn't win the election, but they won the right to be on the ballot. And I said, listen, I have a client who has 40 jury trials. He wants to run for judge, and he seems like he has every qualification. So I sent him out to Beavers. And the next day, Beavers called me back and he said, look, House, he said, we talked to the guy, you know, we checked him out. His supervisor hates him. His coworkers hate him. I don't think his wife likes him much because they got a divorce pending. And would you think about running for judge? You know, and I had not really thought about it because my practice was on cruise control. I mean, I was doing election law, and in the minority community, I was the lawyer for many people. And I wore a suit once a week, maybe. And I thought about it, and I decided, yeah, well, I'll take it. So he said, well, we're looking for someone to slate, an African-American to slate for that seat. And that was really a surprise to me because, as you stated, throughout my career, I had always been on the opposite side of cases with the Democratic Party. But I accepted, I was elected, I had 5 opponents, and I was elected to the circuit court. And during that time, I was a floater for the first 3 years. And in 2001, I was transferred, much to my delight, to the county division, which in turn heard election cases. And I did that until around 2009 when I got a call from the Supreme Court asking would I like to be evaluated, to be assigned to the appellate court. And I was assigned in August of 2009 to the appellate court. And in 2012, I ran for the appellate for that seat, and I was fortunate enough to be slated again, and I won that election. That was my second countywide race. I think if I can, give advice if you want now, but
Yes.
My advice to young people, especially young students who may be listening, is to get involved, number one, politically with your local committeeman, because becoming a judge in Cook County is, in fact, a political process. You get elected by definition, that's a political process. You have to get known by individuals, whether you try to be slated and run, or whether you try to get an appointment. You have to be known. You have to establish a reputation. Because think about it. If a Supreme Court judge, for example, wants to appoint someone to the bench, and the person they appoint turns out to be a knucklehead, that kind of reflects badly upon them. So and they do compare notes. And I found out, not only do they compare notes on how each other's appointees do the job as judge, they also compare notes as to whose appointees actually win their elections and later on go on to be elected. And they do keep score on that point. And so you have to be involved politically. There's no two ways about it. And there's pros and cons about whether or not elected is good or whether getting not appointed is good. I'd say either way, you're going to get politics involved either way. The elected part allows more people to be involved. But that's how I became a judge. I'd like to say I planned it all the way, but I didn't. There are some things that I did along the way that helped. I think being an election lawyer helped. The other thing I think can help everyone is to join the Judicial Evaluation Committee of a bar association. And why is that? Because you can sit in those evaluations and you can listen to the people in the room, and you can listen to the kind of things that they're looking for in order to give good recommendations. The kind of you learn what kind of experience, legal experience is necessary in order to get that pass from the bar associations. And I think that's very important. And I've heard other people say they walk into the room and they look across there and they see someone who they served with on another evaluation some years back. But I do think that serving on a Judicial Evaluation Committee gives you some idea about what qualifications are being looked for. And those are the things that I think are very important to keep in mind. I've served on the Judicial Evaluation, and it helped me to present my qualifications when I was called to go before there. I knew exactly how to present myself. It helped. So those are the pointers, and I'll be quiet for now. Thank you.
Good. Well, Justice House, when you say get involved politically, what does that look like for you? Does that mean attending events? Does that mean volunteering for things in the community? What does that look like in your mind?
For me, it involves two things. I did attend events, and I did donate to different banquets. The one thing I did is that in the 6th Ward, you may recall that Eugene Sawyer became mayor after the death of Harold Washington. And a good friend of mine, Ronald Robbins, became the temporary alderman. And what I did, I volunteered to be the ward attorney. And I was tortured. And what that meant that every Tuesday night, I sat through about, 2.5 hours of constituents complaining about towing cars and vacant lots. Occasionally I got a case out of it, but by being there, it endured me not only to the alderman and to the mayor then, it also endured me to the 6th Ward residents who knew me. So I had a constituency already when my time came, although I was not looking to run for office. I had a constituency already. They knew who I was. When I had the big name cases with the Harold Washington Party case, I was occasionally on television, that kind of thing, in the newspapers, the articles mentioned my name. So I kind of got myself known. Becoming the judge was not my goal. I was trying to help people. And I tell people, you have to help people in life. I want to go back to the story I said before about the young man who came to me to become a judge. I could have just basically been a plain, flat out lawyer. But because I wanted to go further and help him by calling beavers, by helping him meet beavers, that helped me, because I don't think I would have gotten that call from beavers had I not referred my client to him. Beavers would have reached out and got somebody else to get that spot, and perhaps not be sitting here with you right now. But by me helping my client, going above and beyond to help my client, it came back to me. And I tell people, when as much in life as you can, help somebody, because that help will come back to you. And that's my story.
Great insight. All right, well, our next panelist is Carrie Lynn Kraftheffer. And Carrie Lynn is a partner at Ansel Glink. Carrie Lynn is also a graduate of UIC John Marshall. She represents politicians and candidates in election law matters, including ballot access, referenda, campaign finance, and related matters. She has spent her entire career representing Illinois municipalities, townships, park districts, library districts, and school districts, and their officials in day-to-day matters that arise, including corporate matters, labor and employment matters, tax objections, as well as in litigation. Carrie Lynn also serves as one of the primary attorneys for the municipal clerks of Illinois. Carrie Lynn, can you tell us a little bit more about this whole political process of becoming a judge and your perspective on that? I think you're muted.
Okay, yes, my son and my dog were making noise, so I muted myself. So there's nothing quite like election law, and there's nothing quite like Cook County politics. But it's great that we have some members listening today who are new students. I see some of the questions that you have are from 1Ls about what is this whole murky process about becoming judge? Because so far, just in listening to the panel, it really kind of sounds like it's very political. But some of you are raising questions about, well, if we're not organically political people, how does the system work? So let's just talk for a minute about like some of the nuts and bolts, okay? So we just finished an election where we had judges elected, and I think I probably represented, I think, 25 judicial candidates over a number of counties in this last election. And really, everybody kind of has a different path to becoming a judge. So I think what I would like to talk about a little bit is I want to answer some of your questions about what should you do if you're not political. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of using an election lawyer if you want to run for office, and just talk a little bit about some of the technicalities. So first of all, if you're a person who you're really not into politics and you're really not into election law, what could you be thinking of as far as a path to the Robe for you? Well, first of all, be yourself, be authentic. Find out what area of the law are you passionate about. Do you like patent law? Do you like family law? What is it? Learn your law, learn it well, get involved with the Bar Association committees that are applicable to the law that you like, and just get to know people that handle the kind of law that you like, and become an authority in your field. But I would say more important than your political leanings, it's really going to be your character, your reputation, your integrity, and your proficiency as an attorney. Because if judges kind of see how you're performing in court and things like that, when it comes up to being evaluated, while the politics is important, it's going to be more important that you're a person of integrity and honor. So when you take the ethics classes in law school, pay attention to them. I know I remember thinking, gosh, really, do I have to really understand this stuff? And you won't believe the ethical things that you'll get bombarded with. Now, one of you has asked a question about like political leanings and do we have to keep them close to the vest? Well, you don't necessarily when you're developing as an attorney. Certainly you can express your First Amendment opinions and you can have views on things. But when you start campaigning as a judge, you are going to have to understand what you can make representations about and what you can't. And if any of you just watched the Supreme Court nomination hearings, you know how our new justice actually handled those questions, right? So she basically said when she was asked, well, how would you handle a case like this? Hey, I can't really give you an opinion on that because the facts are going to come before me in a certain way, and I'm going to have to evaluate the arguments and the evidence at that point. So you're going to have to be able to kind of distance yourself from that, but it's okay for you to actually have views as you're developing as an attorney. Now, that kind of leads into the next thing, and I don't mean to just sound like an advertisement for election lawyers, but election law is something that you cannot learn on the fly. It is hyper technical, and one form filled out wrong or filed in the wrong place or a couple signatures that are invalidated can really mean life or death for you as a candidate. So you really need to work with an election lawyer because not only do you have to understand the technicalities about getting signatures and filing documents, there are all sorts of things that you probably didn't even think of yet that you're going to have to know, like can I put my name and the word judge on a campaign sign? Well, guess what? There are actually ethics opinions about that. And then what do I do about raising finances? Can I do a joint fundraiser with somebody to raise funds? Can another politician endorse me and raise money for me? Can I run on a slate with other judges? There are all sorts of things like that, and that you'll be expected to address. But one of the problems in election law land is that it seems like a long time till the next election, but there's a very short, narrow window of time for you to actually run for office, do fundraising, collect signatures, get on the ballot, and it would be hard for you to research and evaluate everything that you need to know in a very short period of time. Now, the election law bar in Chicago is very close-knit. Everybody knows everybody. We could be working together on a case in the morning and we could be against each other in a case in the afternoon, and we all usually get along really well and we're comfortable having those working relationships. But it's a narrow number of lawyers that do election law in the state of Illinois. And I've had candidates call me up to 2 years before an election saying, hey, I'm going to run for this during this election cycle and I want to make sure I can retain you. You don't want to wait till the last minute to line up an election lawyer because the good ones will be taken in advance. So keep that in mind as you go forward. And then let's see, was there another thing that well, you know what, you have some other panelists like Jim Nally, who's been in the fray on some of these things, and so I'll let some of your other panelists weigh in on that. But you know, it's hard to give you an overview right now of everything that is required technically in running for judge. There are classes we teach, as Justice Howes referred to, on how to run for judge. And those go through the technicalities about these are the documents, this is where you have to stand in a line on what day to file your papers, these are how you set up a campaign finance committee. So make sure you surround yourself with people who can walk you through the process, not only politically, but also with the legally, technically proficient issues.
Yes, and Carrie Lynn, one of the things that you know too is that there are judicial canons of ethics, and when you become a judge, things that you can and cannot say, can and cannot do and participate in, and maybe Justice DeLorde, you could speak to that a little bit, I think. You're on mute, Justice DeLorde.
I was looking at the questions, getting ready to answer them. So tell me again, what you want me to discuss, please.
Well, there's a question out there of if a person, can they have political opinions about things? Can they be very opinionated about certain things in the political landscape, or can they be a conservative? And how does that affect their chances in becoming a judge and that whole process?
Keep in mind, if we're talking about the Circuit Court of Cook County and the Appellate Court of Illinois, those courts really don't deal with the hot button social issues. They're not dealing with, the same things as the federal courts are. And I don't think it hurts you to be have some kind of a political resume. I would say this, and this may be surprising to some students who are not from Chicago or not from Illinois, is that pretty much the only political route for Cook County is to run as a Democrat. We have a smattering of a couple Republican judges who are still sitting in the bench in Cook County who were elected years ago, but Cook County has flipped so strongly Democratic that it's running as a Republican or a third party is simply not going to be a productive use of time under normal circumstances.
Okay.
And in fact, many of my friends who are local Republicans, they pivot out of the elected system and go to when there's a Republican president in office and get appointed to be a federal judge by the president, whether that be Trump or Bush or Reagan, whoever. And that's where you see a lot of those people end up, is on the federal bench.
I think one of the questions this person was asking as well is about voicing of political opinions, and any advice people have about that. And Justice House, you seem poised to answer that as well too.
He's muted.
There we go. There's a judicial canon of ethics that apply to judicial candidates as well as judges. Once you're a lawyer, even if you're not a judge, you run for judge, you cannot make comments on subjects which may commit you to a certain position on a case that might come before you. We don't have too much say about abortions now because, but there's conceivably some issues that could come up for discussion, that could come up before you to be heard. You cannot commit yourself to those type of issues as a judicial candidate, even if you're not a judge. In addition, you cannot go against any other political candidate unless those candidates are in the same race that you're going to be in. In other words, if they're running in the March primary, you can talk about for or against another candidate in the March primary. But once that primary is over, then you can only comment if you're in the successful and going to be in the general, and that person you're going to comment on is also in the general. It has to be in the same race that you're in. In this judicial canon of ethics from Rule 63 and 67 Supreme Court rules, and those are the restrictions.
Great. All right, and I want to introduce Jim Nally because Council Nally has been working in this whole area of election law for quite a while. James Nally is legal counsel for the Cook County Clerk. James Nally is a graduate of UIC John Marshall as well. Has been a private practice attorney involved in election and municipal law for more than 35 years. He's prepared and argued more than 100 appellate court briefs. He's co-author of the chapter for ICL election law book. He's accepted an appointment now as the legal counsel for the Cook County Clerk. He's represented politicians and candidates in election law matters, including numerous candidates running for the Circuit Court and appellate courts of Cook County. Jim, I'd like to hear your perspective on running for judge and a little bit more about what you see as the mechanics and things that those who are interested need to think about as they prepare to run for judge.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Judge, for having me and my esteemed colleagues here, two of whom are on the bench, but I remember both of them when we were all in the trenches together. So Uh, I guess one of the things I just want to point out is one of the questions I noticed that came up was, is it important to be slated by the Democratic Party? As Justice DeLorde mentioned, in Cook County, you pretty much have to be a Democrat in order to be elected. So the Democratic primary is generally the most important election when you're running for judge in Cook County. In fact, this past cycle, I believe all of the countywide judicial candidates ran unopposed as Democrats. The Republican Party didn't have any candidates running countywide. There were some Republican candidates running in some of the subcircuits, and there are a couple of the subcircuits that from time to time do elect Republican nominees. But generally speaking, Justice DeLorde is right, and Justice House, the Democratic Party is pretty much the route to the bench in Cook County anyhow. Do you have to be slated though? No, you don't have to be slated. You can go out and get your petitions and file in the Democratic primary like anybody else. And the signature requirements vary. Generally speaking, for a countywide circuit judge, you're talking somewhere between 2,500 to 4,000 signatures. It's based on turnout in prior elections. But if you have an organized group of people who want to help you, that is very doable. My rule of thumb has always been when you're circulating petitions, you try to get 3 times whatever the minimum is. Because as Carrie Len mentioned earlier, there's a very active election bar here. And one of the key purposes of hiring an election lawyer is to perhaps thin the field for you by looking at the nomination papers of other people running in your race and seeing if they followed all the rules, got enough valid signatures. It's a lot easier to win a race when you don't have an opponent. So that's the first level of review. But that's not to discourage people who just want to run on their own. Many people run on their own, and many people win without being slated by the Democratic Party. But what I always told my clients is politics is a game of addition. And the more building blocks that you can put into your campaign supporting you, the better. So certainly being slated by the Democratic Party is a big building block, and it's better to have that than not have it. Being able to raise a sufficient amount of money, because in this day and age, it's really all about getting your message out. And the only way to do that nowadays is through media, whether it's social media, whether it's paid media. So being able to raise money is a key important part of being able to have a successful judicial candidacy now. As some of the other panelists mentioned, though, you have to be very careful because you are bound by Supreme Court Rule 67 in terms of raising money. And that's a rule that applies to judges, but also candidates for judge. So you can be a rank and file attorney, but you have to follow that rule if you're a candidate for judge. So unlike an attorney who might be running for a school board or an alderman who could pick up the phone and call people and say, can you donate to my campaign? You are prohibited from doing that if you're running for judge. So you have to have a very strong committee behind you because the people on your committee will be the people making those phone calls on your behalf. And the other component besides getting a good election lawyer, if you're serious about running, you really need to hire a good political consultant. There are a number of consultants here in Chicago and in Cook County who focus a lot on judicial races. And I would look at that group of people and see if you're able to raise enough money. That's one of the important ways to spend your money, because that consultant can help you formulate your message. Most of the consultants will have good contacts in the political world as well and get your name out there and get you meetings with people. And what they can also do is most of them also will assist you with the fundraising, and they have scripts and they have ways of organizing the fundraising so that the people who are going to be doing it on your behalf are going to be able to effectively make phone calls. Because keep in mind, many of these people will be calling not people that they know. Your chairperson of your committee or your finance chair may be going through your Rolodex or your list of people that you know, but they don't know those people personally. So it's important that they have a good script to be able to go to those people and explain why you have to raise the money instead of the candidate. Because a lot of people are going to say, well, why doesn't Jim just call me? I know Jim. I'd write him a check if he called me. Well, they have to explain it from an ethical standpoint. That's not something a candidate for judge can do.
You talked about signatures, Jim. Why do you advise getting 3 times as many signatures as needed? What happens with those signatures once they're turned in on those sheets?
Once they're turned in, your opponents are going to get copies of them as soon as they're filed, and they're going to start checking the number of signatures that you filed, and then they're going to go line by line and check each and every signature to see if it's genuine. And I will tell you that in order to be a genuine signature, the voter has to be registered in that district. So if you're running in a subcircuit, you have to be a registered voter in that subcircuit. If you're running in Cook County, you can't have people in DuPage County signing your petitions, although anybody can circulate for you. Any US citizen over the age of 18 can circulate. But signers have to be registered voters within the district. And they will go through line by line, page by page, and they will look at all your signatures. And I will tell you that even if you're being very diligent and you're trying to ensure that you have good signatures and you train your circulators, you are going to have anywhere between 10 to 20% of your signatures will be bad. And that's because you'll walk up to someone and say, ma'am, sir, I'm running for judge. Could you sign my petition? And the person will say, you'll say, are you a registered voter in Cook County? And they'll say, sure. Well, a lot of people are embarrassed to say they're not registered. So they will tell you they're registered and they're not. Also, people may have been registered and moved, and you'd be amazed at the number of people who think the government tracks them. And as soon as they move from one address to another, the government automatically updates their voter registration address. You have to re-register your new address if you move. So you're going to start from a base of whatever you have, basically saying 20% of my signatures are probably not good. So now that culls it down, and now your opponent really only has to be going after the other 80%. And for various reasons, a number of those will be found to be invalid. It might even be someone's signature, but when it's compared to the signature on the registration record, which is how this is done to verify the signatures, the signature may not look exactly the same, because if you registered to vote, say 15 years ago, your signature changes over time. And keep in mind that they're going to be going through hundreds and thousands of these in registration records check. And you're going to have to be prepared for the fact that some of those aren't going to match. And the clerk working for, say, the Cook County Clerk's Office or the Chicago Board of Elections is not going to have time to make a detailed study of that signature. They're going to look at it, they're going to make a judgment whether they think it's genuine or not, and they're going to move on to the next. So if you have that cushion, if you get 3 times whatever the minimum is, then you're in a very strong position that basically 2 out of every 3 of your signatures would have to be bad in order to get you knocked off the ballot. So you really want to work for that cushion. And even if you don't hit the 3 times, if you make that your goal and you get double what you need, your odds are obviously greatly improved. You're going to stay on through a signature challenge.
Thank you. I think with that, I think it's a good time to open it up to some of the questions that are coming in. And perhaps, Chris, can you help read through some of the questions that might come in for these panelists?
Absolutely. And we have some, and I believe Judge House is going to answer. Is there anything that someone should or must do while in law school if they want to become a judge, or anything that you highly recommend for one else to think about in law school? And then a question that can also piggyback on that: are grades in law school an absolute deal breaker?
Okay. The best thing for law students is to learn to become a good lawyer. Study your cases, become proficient at case analysis, and be a good lawyer. That is really the best thing you can do to be successful in a legal career, whether you become a judge or not. And I think that's the major thing in law school. Are grades important? I don't know. I've been out of law school for 40-something years, and I've never had a client ask me about my grades. Very few ask what law school I went to. But I think, the reputation that you build, and I think the reputation is, well, first of all, the reputation as a judge, you get that in the first 6 months. But I think as a lawyer, you build a reputation when you first come out. And you can have a reputation as a hardworking, bright person, or you can have a reputation as a goofball. It depends on how you handle yourself. But focus on it when you come out. Let me say this. When I first came out, I practiced law with my dad. We had a small practice. And he was a sink or swim type of lawyer. And I went to Loyola Law School, not Loyola Law School. And when I came out, he said, "Here, Nate, go over here and close this estate." I said, I knew all about the theory about perpetuities and all of that. I knew all about theory. I didn't know how to do things. But fortunately, when I went to the Daly Center, had a magnificent judge, Judge Budzinski. And I stumbled. He said, "Have a seat, counsel." I had a seat. And after everybody left, I said, "Come on to the back." And he showed me how to do things. Learn how to do a case correctly when you first come out of school. Once you learn how to do a case the right way, it affects how you practice with the rest of your cases. You know what's required to do a good job on a case. That's what's important. You're not going to get a lot of people asking about grades. Maybe if you're applying for jobs, I didn't have to apply for jobs, but if you apply for jobs, they're going to look at your resume and that sort of thing. But be a good lawyer is the best thing you can be. I don't care if you're a C or D student in law school. If you come out and you know the law, you can effectively present your client's position, you're going to get a lot of respect. They're not going to ask about your law school. They're going to say, obviously, this is a good lawyer. And that's the most important thing.
Great answer. Chris, have you got any follow-up questions?
There are a few that are coming in. Gerard Woodson wants to know, are there any major bars to a candidate funding their own campaign?
Oh, that's a good question. So self-funding of campaigns. Are there bars to candidates self-funding their campaigns? I think either Carrie Lynn or Jim can probably speak to that question.
I'll jump in if it's okay.
Okay. Okay.
There are no bars to self-funding. A person can self-fund up to $100,000 in a judicial campaign, but what that does then, there are limits on what people can give to any candidate running for any office under the Illinois Campaign Finance Act. If a candidate self-funds, and that means any combination of loans or donations to their campaign from either the candidate, their spouse, their parents, or their children, that exceeds $100,000, that takes those limits off on donations from third parties. So a person who self-funds over $100,000, everybody else in that race then is given the opportunity to raise unlimited amounts of money to try to level the playing field. So there's no bar on it, but you want to think about it carefully, because if you do self-fund over that amount, you're giving everybody else a free pass then. And if they have a particularly generous donor who had made, had hit the, say, $5,800 individual limit for their campaign, and you raise the caps, that donor can write them a check for $50,000 the next day.
And also, Jim, I think it's important to talk about campaign finance, opening committees, because you're going to have to report all of this. Is that correct?
Yeah, once you raise or spend $5,000, you're required to open a political committee, a candidate committee if you're running for judge. And as the candidate, you don't want to be an officer of your own committee. You're going to have plenty to do as a candidate, and with the fundraising issues, you kind of want to put fundraising to the side and let other people handle that. So your chairperson and your treasurer are going to be responsible for filing all the reports, keeping track of the money, the expenditures, the money coming in. I've always told people the most important person in a campaign is the treasurer. It's not the chairperson, because the treasurer is responsible for keeping track of all those records and making sure that your reports are filed on time and that they're accurate. And the last thing you want to be is a judicial candidate who draws a complaint, a campaign finance complaint, because there were errors or omissions, maybe innocent errors or omissions in their filing, but calls into question then, their truthfulness and their ability to accurately report the money that they are raising and the money that they're spending. So get a good treasurer for your committee.
Because you have to file those reports with the State Board of Elections, and if those donations come under question, you have to report to the State Board of Elections. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
And those are filed quarterly.
a lot of people think, oh, I can self-fund and I can just spend money freely as long as I'm self-funding. But you have to be cautious. You still have to report those, that self-funding if it's more than $5,000. Okay.
And coming up to that question, we have another one related. How much money is typically needed to have to run a winning campaign?
Okay.
Can I take a shot at it, Judge?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it's there are people who have won judicial races in Cook County spending absolutely no money. They were in the right place at the right time, and they had a good ballot position and a good name and some other things going for them, and they won. It was like winning the lottery. There are other candidates who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and saturated the airways with commercials and did dismally. It's sort of a crapshoot, and it depends on all the local circumstances and the turnout that year in the election, the strength of the slated candidate, whether that's you or someone else, the number of other candidates in the race. But certainly if you're going to make some kind of a serious effort at it, you're going to need to raise something in the tens of thousands, maybe 50,000, at least just to get the literature printed and take care of a lot of other related expenses. Obviously, the sky's the limit.
Another issue is also whether you're running in a sub-circuit or whether you're
Very
going
true.
to run countywide as well, correct?
Yes.
Does anyone want to take a stab at explaining the sub-circuits and why they were created and running in the sub-circuits? Justice House, are you able to take a stab at that? Okay.
Back in the, I guess, late 80s and early 90s, the legislatures, the Republican legislators and the Black legislators from Chicago figured out that there were not a lot of minority candidates in Cook County and not many Republicans in other places being elected. And they figured out a way to do that is to break down some of the judicial spots into what they call subcircuits. Now, as it applied to Cook County, you heard Matt talking earlier about how there's some judges were elected there's some judges who were elected totally outside the city, suburban judges, and there's some elected within the city of Chicago. But what they started doing is phasing out those city-only and Cook County suburb-only judgeships and making them subcircuits. The county-wides were still maintained, but the judges, as they retired out of suburban only or Chicago only judgeships, those judgeships are converted into subcircuits, and those are in 15 geographical districts in Cook County. And what that allows to happen is that you have a smaller geographical area that you have to cover as a candidate, and it gives an opportunity for communities to elect people from their community as judges. And it has been very effective. It increased the diversity in Cook County, it increased the number of Republicans in other areas, and it's been very beneficial in terms of diversifying the bench. And how it works, the person is elected totally from that subcircuit, the voters of that subcircuit elect the person, and they serve for 6 years as a countywide judge would serve. And at the end of that 6 years, they are retained. The difference being that when they are retained, however, they are retained by the entire county votes on whether or not that person will be retained, just like any other judge. And they have to get 60% plus one vote to be successfully retained for another 6-year term. And the nuance is that when you're first elected from a subcircuit, you do definitely have to reside in that subcircuit. But there's an attorney general opinion, and I don't know if a judge wants to try that and try their career on it.
I don't think anyone has tested it yet.
There's an opinion that you can move from your subcircuit after you've been retained by the entire county. And that case has not come up yet. But that's the gist of it. I'm sure others can add on to that.
Great. All right. I think there's a question for Carrie Lynn. Chris, do you have a question for Carrie Lynn?
Yes, the question is, do you have any advice for law students looking to intern in Chicago that do good work with election law and/or trial experience?
Okay, so when you graduate from law school, where do you want to work to try to either, or when you're in law school, where can you work? You know, it's interesting. First of all, you can contact the Chicago Bar Association. You can contact the Law Schools Alumni Association and find those lawyers who do election law and contact them. But you can also just find candidates that you admire and respect and join their campaigns, because one of the ways to get really good experience with respect to what you're going to have to know is working for the campaigns. And as election lawyers, what we do a lot of times, like I represented a mayoral candidate in the last Chicago mayoral election. And when the petitions were very thick, and when we were trying to challenge other candidates on the ballot, we need people to go through and actually, we kind of subcontract out some of that election work by looking at signatures, comparing them with voter registration documents, doing things like that. So sometimes we use the campaign people even to handle some of the election components. So that's one route. I see one of the other questions was also saying, well, should we work for the state's attorney's office or the public defender? I would say that follow your passion again. Yes, it's true, you'll get a lot of hands-on quick experience if you're a prosecutor, if you're the public defender, or you'll get a lot of brief writing experience if you're a law clerk. But follow what is organically, what you feel like you would like. Because if you're at a law firm doing the kind of law that you love, you're also going to gain experience. So there's not like necessarily a recipe for how you would do that. But as far as like, who can we go and just learn election law from, contact the Chicago Bar Association, get their list of the law firms that are the people that are on the election committee and contact them, because I'm sure that many of them will be happy to include you in their election cycle, because there's always a lot of work that needs to be done to gain the technical proficiency that you need to do if you actually want to do election law in the long run.
Great. Well, we are down to our last 5 minutes. This panel has also flown by. I'd just like to ask each panelist if you have a closing thought that you might want to give our participants on the road to the bench, starting with Justice DeLorde.
I think the advice that you've heard tonight has been very sound, particularly with respect to the early years of your practice. One of the biggest mistakes I have seen young lawyers commit is that they try to start out sort of on their own and hang out a shingle. That's really not a good idea. You need to have a mentor. You've got to find a home someplace, even if that's simply officing with some attorneys who have an established practice. If you don't get hired by a large law firm or a medium law firm or a small law firm or a public agency or a corporation, practicing on your own is fraught with peril. Some people have been successful at it, but not many. So make sure you have some good mentorship around you. And then even if you're not maybe in the same office, you have somebody you can pick up the phone and ask, how do I close out an estate? How do I do, what forms do I fill out for that? I also wanted to respond to one question that was in the queue here. I do not believe we have any Native American judges in Cook County. I think if we had one, we would all know who that was. But the associate judge process has been very deliberately administered over the last 20, 30 years to try to be inclusive with groups that were otherwise unrepresented in the judicial branch, maybe particularly with ethnic groups that do not fare well on the ballot. So that is an avenue for perhaps lawyers who have the right qualifications but don't have extensive connections in the legal community.
That's great. Justice House.
I wanted to touch on a matter I heard at the tail end of the last session when someone asked about their trial practice. You know, in my observation as an appellate court judge, and I know the stats too, they said, do you have to have a lot of trial practice to get by the bar associations? I have counseled a number of candidates who have run, and I tell them who may have had good careers legally. I said, when you go before the bar association, point out that you have the ability to do trial work. Point out your ability. Most cases don't go to trial, first of all. Most cases are disposed of by motions before trial. But you need to, emphasize to the candidates, when you go before the bar, point out the strengths of your career, the things that you've done to demonstrate that you have an understanding of the law and you can be fair. And I think those are the things that can kind of help you. An administrative law judge is an excellent foundation where you can point out, yes, we do rule on, make evidentiary rulings, and we do have hearings, and we do have to listen to both sides. And I have heard both sides fairly, and I don't have any complaints about that. Those are the type of things you can bring up. Experience, you know, I tell people that you can have two scenarios. Suppose you have a judge who has a candidate, somewhat limited experience, but has a whole lot of limited ability, but has a whole lot of experience. And on the flip side, you have a person that doesn't have a lot of trial experience, but has a lot of ability. Over time, the person with the most ability is going to wind up benefiting the citizens the most because of the ability. And the experience is going to catch up, but the citizens are going to benefit more with the person who has the greatest amount of ability. So I tell people, when you come up and you don't have a lot of trial experience, emphasize when you go before the bar associations your ability, and that's what I would leave you with.
Great point. Counsel Krafthofer, what closing thoughts do you have?
You know, I think I would say don't despair, because we have just bombarded you with a lot of information. And I think a lot of it might sound like, well, it's who you know and it's what you're involved in. And, you know, view this as a long-term thing. What we didn't really talk about is the fact that a lot of judges who sit on the bench right now were not slated the very first time they tried to be a judge, ran for more than one time. I know one of the questions that you have asked is, well, what if I ran against a slated party candidate? Am I doomed forever? No, you're not. Sometimes you have to wait your turn. You know, there's a lot of things that go into decision making. There are a lot of very experienced lawyers seeking to be judges. So don't despair. Abraham Lincoln ran in many more elections that he lost before he became president. So don't say I'm going to like run once and if I lose, that's going to be it. So that's what I would say. Just view it as a long-term relationship building strategy.
Very good advice. And finally, Jim Nally, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, particularly for the law students. Don't come out of law school figuring out, how am I going to become a judge? You know, as we heard earlier, most of the bar associations aren't even going to look at you until you've been practicing 12 years. And those 12 years aren't 12 years where you've been waiting to become a judge. They're 12 years where you're going to be accomplishing things. As some of our panelists said, once you're out of law school and you land that first job, where you went to law school and your grade point average is irrelevant. They're going to look at your reputation and what you've done over that period of time. And that's what's going to qualify you to get your name out there if you do then, at the appropriate time, decide you want to pursue a judicial career. And the other thing is, as both our judicial panelists mentioned here, doors open up that you never expect to open. Things happen by chance. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
And 12 years is going to pass by in a flash, right? It may not seem like it today, but it does. Anyway, with that, Dean Dickerson, I think we'd like for you to close out our panel tonight.
Thank you, Judge Rice, and thank you for moderating both of our panels. Thanks for the panelists who were on panel 1 and panel 2. This has been a great conversation with a lot of information, and we've recorded this so that will be available beyond our audience. And to those who joined us tonight, thank you for your interest. And like you've heard tonight, if this is your passion, if this is what you want to do, stick with it, build that judicial resume, and then you'll be at the point one day where you can get appointed or elected or assigned to a position. Thank you very much and have a great evening.